This show is brought to you by Safety FM. This is Safety Justice League.
Hey, it's Abby, and I am here with the rest of the Safety Justice League for a very special episode of the Safety Justice League, where we're not kidding, but I want to add some lightness to the topic. But we're going to be talking about coronavirus, or COVID-19, or novel coronavirus. And the reason that we wanted to pull together this podcast and get together on this topic is because there's obviously a lot of chatter about it on social media, and there's a lot of misinformation and opinion. And another interesting phenomenon going on, which is safety professionals that we know better are not thinking about their foundations as far as hierarchy of controls and other things that we're familiar with as safety and risk professionals. And so the group of us wanted to get on and chop it up a little bit about coronavirus and what we're seeing online as far as information and where we are getting our information from to stay on top of everything. So, I can start with what I've been using for my informational purposes, which is the old standbys, the gold standards as far as the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and also the World Health Organization, WHO. So I've been using those as my go-to. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like those plus my state health department and some other local angle types of resources are really the best right now.
Well, I've been using you as my resource. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, Abby's our local resident expert in coronavirus, so we've been running everything past her.
I think it's interesting because I'll admit that I have not delved deeply into this. I've just sort of been taking it all in from the back, I guess. And it's just really interesting to see the way that people are reacting. Like you're saying, Abby, there's a lot of people that have sort of lost their minds in response to this. And not to say that we shouldn't take it seriously at all, but, going out and buying 2,000 rolls of toilet paper was the news report that I heard yesterday on the way into work. And they actually meant to buy 200 rolls, but they bought 2,000 and decided to make a Game of Thrones toilet paper chair in their yard, in their living room instead.
What?
Yeah.
I have to check this out. I mean, simple mistake, right? It happens to everybody. You want to buy 200 rolls, you buy 2,000.
It's easy. I would think
when that happens.
Right?
So can I ask a question? Does anybody understand this whole thing about the toilet paper? Is it just a prepper
I
situation?
absolutely do not understand it. And I think that it is that prepper and hoarding mentality, or like, think about what your parents would tell you when you're away at college or away from home for the first time. Like, what are the things that they thought that you should be stocked up on in the case of literally anything? Bottled water, toilet paper? I don't know. Did your parents tell you to have toilet paper? I don't think mine did.
I don't get it.
I think that was sort of an understood necessity.
Right.
Yeah, I don't. There's a lot of things that are being bought that I don't understand, that have zero to do with coronavirus, that are just being like taken completely off the shelves. My wife went shopping the other day, and she was just sending me text messages of pictures of empty shelves of things that I was like, what does that have to do? Why toilet paper again? Why are all the paper towels gone?
You're in Texas.
Maybe paper towels. I can see that people are doing some extra cleaning and you're using paper towels to wipe things away. That I can understand. But I was hearing reports of certain medications, like all cold, flu, ibuprofen, everything off the shelves. And there was
all the zinc gone too?
Yeah, everything's gone. Everything's gone. But for real, there's stuff that people need that now they go to the store like, oh, I just got to run to Target or CVS real quick. And you can't do that right now. So, I don't know if you guys are major Target shoppers, but I am. And I live in the state of Target. And I received an email from Target Corporate that they are restocking the shelves and that they're actually going to institute some limits on some common items so that people can't overbuy toilet paper or children's ibuprofen and things like that.
Okay, so Jason Lucas, you're in Texas and you're noticing some shortages. I'm in Iowa and I haven't seen any shortages anywhere. There's been all the shelves are full everywhere I go. I haven't noticed anything.
In Texas, I noticed it. I'm actually visiting one of my branches in Alabama, and there's no shortage of anything here. Huh. So I think it's just the prepper mentality again of Texans. Maybe we're a little bit more prep ready.
How about you, Abby? You said you're getting messages from Target. There must be some things.
Oh, yeah. And on my local Facebook groups and friends and family that are local in Minnesota and Wisconsin are experiencing that they're seeing empty shelves. And this goes back to over the weekend even.
How about you, Jason?
So I'm in New Mexico. There have not been any reported cases. And from what I'm being told on Facebook, as long as you visited an Allsup's gas station and used the restroom, you're immune. So that's pretty much everybody.
So,
wait, New Mexico doesn't have any cases. Are all of the rest of us in states that there are cases?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are cases in Iowa for sure. So.
Yeah, Minnesota has 3 as of today.
I think Iowa had 3 yesterday. I don't know about today.
Well, and I want to kind of touch on the prepper thing a little bit, because I think you can compare that to a lot of the ways that we approach safety problems in the workplace. You know, we find a hazard and it seems really scary to one person or another. And I just happen to have this come up today. The hazard in question, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to divulge that information, but the hazard in question was actually a pretty innocuous thing. But because the perception was that it was really big, bad, and scary, some extreme measures started getting talked about and discussed. And I had to kind of throw my hand up and say, hey, look, yes, there's a hazard here. But if we go and we try to implement $1 million fixes to this thing, what other issues are we going to cause? The hazard is there because something else exists, because something else is taking place. So we need to address that whole chain of events, that whole system, before we start getting into just going and spending $1 million. And I think that's sort of the comparison that I would make to this toilet paper phenomenon.
Right. Or that's a good segue, exaggerating or overreacting. I think that's a good segue to talk about N95 respirators.
Oh my goodness. What, do you have some?
Do I have some? I actually do have a box that I had for sanding a while back that I just had sitting in my garage. But I think that it's one of the more ridiculous things about this entire scenario is the N95s. I
agree.
Yeah, I think it go ahead, Abby.
Oh, I was going to say, I think people immediately, if we're old enough, went back to SARS. And when you think of SARS, I think of masks and widespread use of masks. And I think maybe that's where people's minds went, especially because information about coronavirus says that it's related to SARS because their coronavirus is. But what we have now is a novel coronavirus, which is different from what we experienced with SARS and how it's spread and how quickly and other factors. But I just think that the visual, maybe people want to see something visual. And that's often why people go back to PPE. And even when you've trained workers or conducted numerous learning sessions about PPE being the last resort, that people always go first to that visual thing, because you can't really see some engineering or substitution types of controls or administrative controls, but you can see that PPE right there on their face.
Yeah, and I think that it gives a false sense of security automatically just to see a mask on or to see that visual representation of protection avoiding social situations may not give that same sense of security that it does when you see somebody in a mask. But to bring it back to your point in the very beginning, Abby, of the idea of even safety professionals skipping the hierarchy of controls altogether and jumping straight to PPE, that's something that we learned from the very beginning in this industry and safety as a whole, is the hierarchy of controls. And so I just wonder, why are we jumping as safety professionals right through the hierarchy of controls to the final aspect of control, PPE?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also consider that they could cause more harm than good. If you have, now it's true that if they are provided and used on a voluntary basis, then your company does not have to provide fit testing or medical evaluation. However, that is what the regulations say, and the regulation is the minimum standard. And so, my concern as a safety professional is that if you give or provide a mask, even if it's voluntary usage, if you provide a mask to somebody who is not medically fit enough to wear that mask safely, it will put additional strain on the respiratory system, and it could actually cause injury. So I don't think it's good enough. We need to do better as safety professionals to, not just say, well, if it's voluntary, we just can wash our hands of the responsibility. We have the general duty clause that, that's a recognized hazard. You shouldn't really be wanting people to wear respirators unless you know for sure it won't hurt them. So I don't really see the voluntary usage thing as a very good loophole if we're going to be good safety stewards.
I think part of it stems from, I think we do a fairly poor job of teaching people the difference between what is truly risky and what is a hazard. There needs to be that distinction, because yes, a bottle of hydrofluoric acid that's locked up in a cabinet is hazardous, but there's really no risk to people. And I think we do a poor job at quantifying risk and teaching people what really is going to have a serious impact and what isn't probably going to have a serious impact. And I think this is probably one of those cases where we've jumped to, oh my God, it's scary, before we really assess what it is. Definitely something to take seriously, but and I'm sure everybody's heard the comparisons of the coronavirus to the common flu, and how much more deadly the flu is. And I think that's a sensational argument in itself, but there is a point there. We have to really distinguish. What is the serious problem that we need to address, and how should we do that in a reasonable sense.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of it is here's something that is probably going to blow everybody's mind from the standpoint of our listeners, not necessarily the group speaking, but from our listener standpoint. The fact is the likelihood is that everybody in the world at one point or time in the future is going to have coronavirus. They're going to acquire it some way, some shape, or some form. The influenza that we deal with today comes from a 1917 pandemic of influenza strain, and I can't really imagine there's many people in the world that has any age on them at all that hasn't had the flu at one point in their life. As time progresses, then the medical community, the scientific community is going to catch up to this, and they're going to have what they need medically to bring healing to it and give shots for it and all that other stuff. But the truth of the matter is, the likelihood is that this strain is not disappearing anytime soon, but we just need to be a little bit more prepared and a little bit more adamant.
Okay, so that's a really good point. And I like Jason M's point about risk literacy. So that kind of brings us to, like, what are reasonable actions that employees can explore or consider doing right now? And I'm going to pass that over to Abby.
Well, and I also want to broaden this too, because as Jason M was speaking, I was thinking about how frequently lately that I've spoken to friends and family, people that are not in safety, and giving them kind of a 30-second to 3-minute talk about risk and how to assess their risk and look at information that's out there, taking credible sources and throwing out the other stuff and making good decisions for themselves for right now, and assessing risk for the immediate future and further out future, just to, keep a good head about them. So I think not only thinking about guidance for our employees and our organizations. But this is a great time, unfortunately, for safety professionals to really shine in what we do, and it can educate people about what a safety professional is all about and how we're impacting our organizations, and how we can also talk on that public health side of things. Even if you don't have that public health degree, a lot of the safety and risk principles that we're educated in and that we do day to day at our workplaces can apply to this situation as well.
And so do you guys see safety professionals standing up and shining, or do you think that we're maybe as a group dropping the ball in this situation?
No, I think we need a redo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
I
that's
agree.
more of a challenge to people, like do better, take the lead with communication. I think that definitely whoever said that we're dropping the ball, I think that is happening, unfortunately, just by the rate of and the quality or poor quality of information that I'm seeing out there from people in the industry. It's shocking, actually.
Yeah, and I wonder if it isn't part, lesson to be learned here is, take the principles that we learned in our profession and that we apply at work, and take them and apply them to everything else you do, because the principles apply across the board. In fact, one of the most amazing things about safety is that, like, every time I look at other parts of my life, there are so many parallels. So it's kind of funny that, we would, maybe even some of the better safety professionals that are really good at what they do, it's almost like they just completely turn off all of those skills and knowledge when it comes to anything outside of work.
I agree. And maybe what we should do to wrap this up would be to think through the hierarchy of controls. And maybe we don't have all the answers, but maybe what we talk about could prompt people to go and find those specific answers. Talking about micro ways, micro innovations, or not innovations, what's the right word? Interventions that we can make in our workplaces or in our personal life about this coronavirus stuff.
I think the first thing is education. We need to understand what it is we're working with, so that we can come up with good controls. And I think that's what we've been getting at this whole session here, is that we just took news reports at face value and sort of went with the mob mentality and the hype and the sensationalism of it, and forgot. And I think that was, somebody already mentioned that. I don't know if it was Nate. For me, I think I need to educate myself a little bit more before I figure out what a sensible, reasonable, practical action would be in terms of engineering controls, because that's not my field.
I think our first step is to not be the media. A storm comes and it becomes Stormageddon on all the news channels, all the news stations, and this is no different. This has become COVID Armageddon or whatever, and it's just around the clock conversations about it. But I think that we need to make sure we're steering our listeners to those places that Abby was talking about, the CDC, the World Health Organization, places that are going to provide the most realistic information about this. And start there by educating themselves so that they can better follow that hierarchy of controls.
Yeah, one of the things I would recommend is, I really like what Jason Maldonado said about, knowing what the problem is and being educated about it, because, that's the first thing. But, what some of the practical things a business could do is, identify those who may be at risk. If there are any employees who do have, and Abby may have to correct me, but I think people that have respiratory issues or maybe have a compromised immune system, or maybe that who are older, if those people are exposed, they're probably at a higher risk than a middle-aged worker or a younger worker. So maybe identify who's most at risk. That'd be a good place to start. And then what you can do is post hand sanitizer, and then communicate out to promote those valued behaviors, such as using hand sanitizer frequently, sanitation wipes, wipe down frequently touched surfaces, and then limit travel and limit in-person meetings. Use teleconferencing, maybe telecommute, have employees work from home, especially if they're showing any signs of feeling sick. But I also think it's important that educating knowing what we're dealing with, it's that if somebody is showing signs of sickness, it's probably too late. It's probably spread already. So implementing these things sooner rather than later. Don't wait until there's a case in the office to do these things. Roll them out now.
Right. And I think that's almost the problem right now, is that people are seeing that, like I said, here in Minnesota, we only have 3 confirmed cases. And so when people, the general public or our workers that we're dealing with, when they see those numbers, it's not super impressive. So we're almost up against the same types of challenges that we face as a safety professional in our day-to-day life, as far as communicating what the issues are or the actual risk, when there aren't huge numbers to point at that say, see, look, bad things are happening. You don't want this to happen to you. So we don't have a lot of examples. And also backing up to the populations that could be more susceptible to illness, and really any type of illness. So that can be a slippery slope, or kind of a weird area to get into as far as like profiling. But again, that education piece and putting the education out there that says, hey, if you're over 60 or over 65, I forget the specific guidance from CDC, but if you're over a certain age, consider, are you going on a cruise that maybe you don't want to do that, or air travel that you may want to, not travel by air, and some other precautions based on specific populations that may already have some compromising issues going on. But again, being very careful with how that's presented to the workforce, that it's more of informational purposes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that. I was just thinking more practical.
There's plenty of employer focused guidance and safety professional focused guidance out there. And the best part is a lot of the CDC and the World Health Organization information is geared towards just the average person. So it's not super technical. There's a lot of infographics. There's a great part of the World Health Organization website where they talk about myths. And so there's even more entertaining ways that they're presenting the information. So they really know their average public type of audience. And so the information that's out there, it's really for anyone's consumption. It doesn't need a lot of understanding or technical background to understand what the information is trying to get across. And so while everything Nate said and all the stuff from the different resources is super sound guidance, for some reason there's a disconnect. And I still come back to the fact that there aren't huge, impressive, and I put that in air quotes, but impressive numbers of confirmed cases or things going on. So again, we're communicating to people with that challenge of, they don't really think it's a problem, or they're of average to good health, and so they don't think it's a problem. But I would still contend, just like what Jason Lucas said, that this virus will be out there until we have a vaccine or a treatment for it, or both, and until the cases can be tightened down. Because right now what's happening is that we're not able, or not we ourselves, but experts aren't able to control the spread. And that's what's concerning, is that there will be this curve of cases going up, and then they drop off, and then all of a sudden the case numbers shoot up again. And so in speaking to an epidemiologist here locally from the University of Minnesota, that it's that type of growth and inability to control in even smaller areas as far as an outbreak, that's the concerning thing. That's kind of the wild card in all of this.
Well, and the growth is exponential, isn't it? I mean, yeah, it's like something like within a week, I saw some estimate of 7,000 cases within a week. And by the end of the month, 160,000 in the United States.
Yes. And these are related to that incubation period for coronavirus, is that a person could actually be spreading it through exhaled breath or coughing and sneezing and touching surfaces for days to over a week or two before they're actually sick. And so imagine all the contact that could take place when you don't know that you're actually sick and you're spreading it. That's what we're seeing.
And
I want to back up. I want to back up real quick, just a minute, to some of the things that Abby was saying about because there's not a gigantic source. We're not taking it necessarily as seriously as we should, and I think that is directly correlated with how we handle some of our safety incidents as a whole as well. Because I think that's if we have a little one-off incident, we don't necessarily take it quite as seriously as if we would have had 5 of the same style of incident. And so do y'all think that as safety professionals, it's kind of folly, or it's kind of how we are used to doing things from the standpoint of if there was this bigger pattern that we could see, then we would take it a little more seriously?
Oh, absolutely. I heard a really good analogy. Someone explained it like it's actors on a stage where, the lights are off, all the actors come onto the stage, and you can't really see what's going on. And then, when they start testing and they start picking up the cases, it's like as if the lights are coming on. But those cases weren't there as the lights came on. Those cases were spreading and getting into position before we could even detect it, before they even had the kits out to detect this virus. So, now it's probably spreading a lot behind the scenes that we don't even know. It's probably a lot more widespread already than we can even comprehend, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're seeing that rapid uptick as well in the confirmed cases, is because test kits are becoming a little bit more available. So you're having an uptick in confirmed cases because there's more people being tested.
Right. And am I concerned personally about it? Am I stocking up? No, I'm not. The last thing I want to do is try to spread panic or have anyone despair over those thoughts. I think most people are going to get it. Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 80% of the people who are exposed to it aren't even affected by it at all. Is that right?
Yeah, people are recovering. If you look at that Johns Hopkins mapping, or the tracker with the map of the world that shows you where all the cases have come from, and the deaths, unfortunately, and also it tracks recovered cases. And so, yes, people in general, they're recovering from it. But if in that time that a person who's of average to good health has it and they're spreading it, they may be coming into contact with people that aren't able to fight it off as well. And so that's where the concern lies.
And another aspect. Go ahead.
So I think if I can kind of sum everything up that we're talking about, we're talking about something that is going to be widespread, that should be taken seriously. But I think, if you go back to the beginning of our conversation, the message is do what's appropriate. Do what's commensurate with this infection, this virus, without making it more sensational than it needs to be.
Right.
Absolutely. Take that customized approach and analyze your personal risk, your family's risk, your organization's risk, and take the appropriate precautions and the appropriate reactive measures in some cases as well.
Yeah. And another thing is, try not to spread panic or fear or despair. It's not as big and as bad as it sounds. And then, jumping to the N95s, I think is a product of that. The N95 probably doesn't even stop it anyway. It sounds like it can spread through breathing. It's not particulate. So the N95s block 95% of particles. I don't think it's going to stop your breath from coming through, the virus from coming through. And even then, you have to have it on and wear it perfectly all day long. It's not fun breathing through a respirator. I think that's part of it, is that everyone's excited about something new. Oh, I get to wear a mask, and it sounds kind of fun. Maybe never tried it before and it's exciting, but they're not very comfortable, especially if you're going to wear them all day long. And, the elastic bands eventually start hurting the back of your head. You have the little metal band that goes over your nose. And I pretty much guarantee you that any employee who tries wearing one of those all day long, they're not going to want to do it a second day. And they're disposable. So consider, if you have 500 employees, to provide a week's worth of masks for all 500 employees, you're talking 2,500 masks per week. If you have 2,000 employees, that's 10,000 masks per week. And that's a lot of masks. And I don't think a lot of people a lot of businesses have that much in stock that's going to last them very long if they were to roll those out. So it's probably in most cases a flash in the pan solution anyway.
So do your mask math and realize that this is not going to be a sustainable solution for your company. And so as the safety and risk professional, we need to go back to our fundamentals of hierarchy of controls, risk assessment, risk analysis, and risk control. And take that lead and be that lead person at your organization to bring them through this. I don't want to call it a crisis, but it's definitely something that we need to put our attention to in these modern times as we're learning more about coronavirus, and that as it spreads in different areas and locations, that we need to be nimble.
All right, before we close, I have the solution. Since so many places want to take this stuff to extreme, I say we just get those little pet collars that prevent them from scratching after they've had surgery or whatever.
The e-collar.
And we'll just put those collars on all our workers so they can't touch their faces.
Make it fashionable.
And if you put a plastic bag over the top of the cone, the breath can't escape. So,
boom, we have solved this problem, everyone.
Yeah, just stop breathing.
Right.
Easy.
Do as we do, not as we say. Well, that escalated quickly. Thank you guys. This was an interesting conversation, unexpected, about coronavirus. So hopefully people are able to get some lessons here and they can apply them at their workplace.
Absolutely. Keep calm, everybody.
You are listening to Safety Justice League podcast on Safety FM.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.